Dawn breaks over New Guinea on August 17, 1943. The sky glows amber, painting shadows across 4 Japanese airfields clustered near Waiwak. At Borum Airfield, ground crews are warming up 60 fighters. Nakajima Ki 43 Hayabusas parked wingtip to wingtip in neat rows. The pilots are still drinking their morning tea. They have no idea what's about to hit them. At 4:42 a.m., the thunder begins. 47 B-24 Liberators and B-17 Flying Fortresses emerge from the darkness. Bomb bay doors yawning open. The first explosions rip through the packed aircraft. Flames leap skyward. Some Japanese pilots sprint toward their planes, desperate to get airborne. They never make it. By 900 a.m., the heavy bombers are gone. The Japanese at Waiwak breathe a collective sigh of relief. They've survived the worst of it. Surely the Americans won't return. They're catastrophically wrong. At 9:15 a.m., a new sound rumbles across the horizon, lower, angrier. More than 30 B-25 Mitchell bombers streak toward the airfields at treetop level, escorted by 80 P-38 Lightnings. But these aren't ordinary B-25s. Their noses bristle with gun barrels. 8, 10, sometimes 14, 50 caliber machine guns crammed into every available space. They look like flying porcupines. Like something cobbled together in a junkyard. The Japanese have a name for these monsters. Bake monohiki ghost planes. American bomber crews call them something else. Papistrafas. What the Japanese don't know, what even most American commanders didn't believe is that these aircraft shouldn't exist. They violate every engineering specification in the book. They're overweight, nose-heavy, and dangerously unstable. North American Aviation's chief engineers declared them structurally impossible. The Army Air Forces almost court-martialed the man who built them. His name was Paul Irvin Gunn. He had no engineering degree, no formal training. He was a 50-year-old airline pilot who'd been forced back into uniform when the Japanese invaded the Philippines. But on this August morning in 1943, as his modified Strafas unleashed torrents of 50 caliber fire across Borum, Wewak, Dagwa, and Boot airfields, none of that matters. In the next 6 hours, the 4th Japanese Air Army will lose 174 aircraft. Their operational strength will collapse from 200 planes to just 30, and the tide of the Pacific War will shift forever. What Paul Pepe Gunn didn't know that morning was that his illegal modifications would inspire every gunship the United States would ever build, including the AC-30 Spectre that still rules battlefields today, 75 years later. This is the story of how a man with no credentials changed aerial warfare forever. By mid-1942, the Allied position in the Southwest Pacific was desperate. The Japanese controlled New Guinea, the gateway to Australia. Their 4th Air Army operated with near impunity, bombing Allied positions at will. American bomber crews faced an impossible problem. They couldn't hit what they couldn't catch. Traditional bombing doctrine called for high-altitude precision bombing. B-17s and B-24s would approach targets at 20,000 feet, drop their payloads, and return home. In theory, they could put a bomb in a pickle barrel from 4 miles up. In practice, against moving ships and hidden jungle airfields, they missed constantly. The numbers told a grim story. In the first 6 months of 1942, the 5th Air Force flew 593 bombing missions against Japanese shipping. They sank exactly 7 vessels. That's a 1.3% success rate. Meanwhile, Japanese reinforcement convoys streamed into New Guinea unimpeded, bringing troops, supplies, and aircraft. Low bombing worked better, but it was suicide. At 500 feet, bombers became easy targets for anti-aircraft fire. Planes were shot down before they could release their payloads. Those that survived often got caught in their own bomb blasts. The expert consensus was unanimous. Medium bombers were worthless for ground attack. They were too slow, too vulnerable, and couldn't carry enough forward-firing armament to suppress enemy defenses. Major General George Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force, had inherited a force designed for a war that didn't match Pacific realities. Fighter bombers like the P-38 Lightning could strafe effectively, but they couldn't carry heavy bomb loads. Heavy bombers could carry tons of ordnance, but couldn't aim it precisely at low altitude. The Allies needed something that didn't exist, a heavily armed gunship that could fly low, survive the gauntlet of enemy fire and destroy targets on the ground. North American Aviation's B-25 Mitchell had potential. It was faster than the B-17, more maneuverable and could take punishment, but its forward-firing armament was pitiful. Just 250 caliber machine guns in the nose, operated by the bombardier. The plane was designed for bombing, not shooting. Failed solutions littered New Guinea's airfields. Engineers tried mounting additional guns in external pods. The pods created dangerous drag and frequently jammed. They experimented with faster bomb release mechanisms. Planes still got shredded by their own shrapnel. They attempted skip bombing techniques, bouncing bombs off the water into ship holes. It worked occasionally, but required perfect timing and left bombers exposed to withering fire. The stakes couldn't be higher. In March 1943, Japanese convoys would attempt to reinforce Lae, New Guinea with 6,900 troops aboard 8 transport ships. If those reinforcements landed, Allied ground forces would face another year of brutal jungle warfare. Thousands would die. Australia itself might fall within range of Japanese invasion. Kenny needed a miracle. He needed a weapon that could stop ships at sea, destroy aircraft on the ground, and turn medium bombers into weapons of mass destruction. What he needed was sitting in a maintenance hangar in Townsville, Australia, cursing at a disassembled A-20 Havoc light bomber. Paul Papey Gunn was 54 years old in August 1942, ancient by combat pilot standards. He'd served in the Navy during World War I as an enlisted mechanic, learning to fly in his spare time. After the war, he'd retired and moved to Manila, where he founded Philippine Airlines, flying Beech 18s between islands. He had a wife, Clara Louise, and 4 children living in the Philippines. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Gunn volunteered immediately. He flew evacuation missions, fleeing refugees to Australia as Japanese forces swept across the Philippines. On one of his final flights out of Baton, he had to leave his family behind. They were captured and interned at Stu Thomas Prison Camp in Manila. Papey Gunn had a score to settle and he was about to settle it with firepower. Captain Paul Gunn stands in a sweltering maintenance hangar outside Townsville, Australia, staring at an A-20 Havoc bomber with pure disgust. It's August 1942 and the 5th Air Force has just assigned him as maintenance officer for the 3rd Bombardment Group. The job is supposed to keep him away from combat. It's supposed to be safe. Gunn hates it. He's an airline pilot, a civilian who knows how to fix engines and keep planes flying on shoestring budgets. He has no engineering degree from MIT, no blueprints from North American Aviation, no formal weapons training. What he has is rage, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept that things can't be done. The A-20 in front of him has 2 50 caliber machine guns in the nose and 4 30 caliber guns along the fuselage. Against Japanese fighters and ground positions, it's like throwing rocks at a tank. Gunn has just returned from a combat mission where he watched 3 A-20s get shot down trying to suppress a single Japanese airfield. The plane simply didn't have enough firepower to silence enemy guns before making their bombing runs. "This is goddamn useless," Gunn mutters, yanking the bombarder's clear plexiglass nose section off the A-20. His crew enlisted mechanics who've watched him work for weeks exchange nervous glances. "Sir, that's the bomb aiming station." Sergeant First Class Harold Mall says carefully. "The bombardier needs that. The bombardier's a target." Gunn snaps back. He sits in a glass bubble waiting to get shot. "We're not bombing from altitude anymore. We're going in at wavetop level. We need guns, not bomb sites." He's already sketching modifications on a grease-stained notepad. The insight crystallizes in his mind. If they're attacking at 200 feet, they don't need precision bomb sites. They need overwhelming suppressive fire. They need to turn bombers into flying gun platforms. Strip everything out of the nose. Gun orders. Bombardier station, navigator station, all of it. I want 4 50 caliber machine guns mounted where that glass was forward firing fixed position. And I want gun pods on the fuselage sides. 4 more 50s. The mechanics stare at him like he suggested flying to the moon. "Captain, that's not how." Maul begins. "I know it's not how." Gunn interrupts. "That's why we're losing now. Get me 450s from that wrecked B-17 on the flight line and find me some ammunition feed systems." He's already mentally calculating weight distribution, recoil forces, ammunition loads. He has no formal training for this. No manuals to consult. But he spent years keeping decrepit Philippine Airlines planes flying with spare parts and ingenuity. This is just another mechanical problem. A bigger, deadlier, more beautiful problem. "Sir," Maul says quietly. "If this doesn't work, if this plane becomes unstable." Gunn looks at him with eyes that haven't forgotten Stomer's prison camp. Haven't forgotten his wife and children behind barbed wire. "Then I'll test it myself," he says, "because I'm not watching another crew die in an undergunned plane while my family rots in a Japanese prison. Now move." The transformation begins. For 3 weeks, Gunn's team works in secrecy. They operate at night away from the main flight line because what they're doing isn't technically authorized. They haven't submitted the modifications for engineering review. Haven't received approval from North American Aviation. Haven't waited for the glacial machinery of military bureaucracy to stamp forms and triplicate. They're building a weapon the Army Air Forces didn't ask for. The forward gun installation is the hardest part. Gun mounts 4 50 caliber Browning machine guns where the bombardier used to sit, angled slightly downward. Each gun feeds from ammunition boxes holding 400 rounds. The total weight 720 pounds, all concentrated in the nose. The A-20 wasn't designed for this. The center of gravity shifts forward dangerously. It's going to be nose heavy as hell, Sergeant Moore warns. Then we'll compensate with tail weight, Gun replies. Already moving ammunition stores rearward. They add 4 more 50 caliber guns in external fuselage pods, 2 per side. The pods create drag, but Gun accepts the trade-off. Total armament, 8 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns, plus the existing defensive turrets. When all 8 nose and fuselage guns fire simultaneously, the plane spits out 800 rounds per minute of 50 caliber devastation. It's a flying buzzsaw. On September 3, 1942, Gun conducts the first test flight personally. He climbs into the pilot seat of his Frankenstein creation, runs through the pre-flight checklist, and taxis to the runway. The ground crew watches nervously. Some are taking bets on whether he'll crash. The engines roar. The modified A-20 accelerates down the runway and lifts off. It handles differently. Nose heavy like Moore predicted, but Gun compensates with trim adjustments. At 2,000 feet, he levels off and arms the forward guns. He spots an abandoned Japanese supply barge offshore. Perfect target. Gun pushes the nose down, diving toward the barge. At 250 Maybach at 500 feet, he squeezes the trigger. The A-20 shutters as all 8 forward guns open fire. Tracer rounds streak toward the barge like a river of light. The noise is apocalyptic. A rolling thunder that drowns out even the engine roar. The barge disintegrates in seconds, torn apart by concentrated fire. Gun pulls up. Adrenaline surging. The plane handled the recoil. The guns didn't jam. It works. He lands 20 minutes later with the biggest smile anyone's seen since Pearl Harbor. "We're doing this to every bomber in the squadron," he announces. But when word reaches 5th Air Force headquarters, the reaction isn't celebration, it's fury. On September 8, 1942, Gun receives a summons to Port Moresby. Major General George Kenney wants to see him immediately. The message doesn't say why, but everyone knows. Gun modified operational aircraft without authorization. He violated safety protocols. He bypassed the chain of command. The engineering staff at headquarters has 3 words for Gun Strafe. That is illegal. The briefing room at Port Moresby falls silent as Captain Paul Gunn walks in. 20 officers are already seated, engineers, operations staff, and senior commanders. At the head of the table sits Major General George C. Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force. Kenney is 53, a veteran of World War I aerial combat and known for creative thinking, but is also a stickler for following procedure. The engineering staff has already briefed him on Gunn's unauthorized modifications. "Captain Gunn," Kenney begins, his voice neutral. "I understand you've been busy." "Yes, sir." "You've modified an operational A-20 bomber without submitting engineering specifications, without stress testing, without approval from North American Aviation or from this command." "Yes, sir." Major Robert Walsh, Chief Engineering Officer, stands abruptly. He's holding a technical manual and his face is red. "General, what Captain Gunn has done is not only unauthorized, it's dangerous." Walsh says he's mounted 720 pounds of armament in the forward fuselage of an aircraft never designed for that weight distribution. The center of gravity is completely wrong. Those guns could tear the nose structure apart under sustained fire. This modification could kill every crew that flies it. The room erupts. Officers shout overlapping objections. The recoil forces alone. No engineering analysis. Compromised structural integrity. He could face court-martial for Kenney raises his hand. Silence returns. "Captain Gunn," Kenney says quietly. "What do you say to Major Walsh's concerns?" Gunn meets his gaze steadily. "I say I test flew it myself, sir. I fired all 8 guns at 2:00 p.m. in a dive. The plane handled it, the structure held, and I destroyed a target in one pass that would have required 3 conventional bombing runs." "That's anecdotal," Walsh snaps. "One test flight doesn't prove. Then let me prove it in combat." Gunn interrupts. He turns to Kenney. "Sir, we've got a Japanese airfield at Buna that's been hitting our supply lines for 3 months. Give me 16 strafers in 3 days. If I can't knock that airfield out of commission, I'll personally dismantle every modification and never touch another aircraft. Walsh starts to object again, but Kenny silences him with a look. What about crew safety, Captain? How do you know these modifications won't fail under combat stress? Because I'll lead every mission myself, Gunn says. If my planes fail, I fail first. The room goes quiet. This is the moment, the pivot point. Kenny stares at Gunn, weighing risk against desperation. The 5th Air Force is losing the air war. Conventional tactics aren't working. The Japanese are reinforcing faster than the Allies can stop them. Kenny makes his decision. Major Walsh, he says slowly. How long would it take to properly engineer and test Captain Gunn's modifications through official channels? Walsh blinks. 6 months minimum, probably longer. We'd need North American aviation till we don't have 6 months, Kenny says flatly. We might not have 6 weeks. The Japanese are planning a major offensive. He turns to Gunn. You get your 16 strafers, Captain, but you're upgrading to Major as of today because I want you to have command authority. And if a single plane breaks apart because of your modifications, I'm holding you personally responsible. Understood, sir. One more thing, Kenny adds. If this works, if your strafers can do what you claim, I want B-25 Mitchells converted, too. Same armament package, but heavier. Can you do that? Gunn doesn't hesitate. Yes, sir. I'll need 3 months and access to spare parts from damaged aircraft. You'll have it. Now, get out of here before Major Walsh has an aneurysm. As Gunn salutes and leaves, Walsh leans toward Kenny. Sir, this is reckless. If those planes fail, then we're no worse off than we are now, Kenny says. But if Gunn is right, if he's actually turned medium bombers into effective strafers, we might have a weapon the Japanese can't counter. He looks out the window toward the flight line, where mechanics are already beginning conversions on more A-20s. Sometimes, Major, you have to let the Mavericks run because they see solutions the rest of us are too cautious to imagine. If you're enjoying this story of innovation under fire, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're uncovering forgotten stories of military ingenuity every week. Now, let's see how Papist gamble paid off in combat. September 12, 1942, dawn over New Guinea. Major Paul Papy Gunn climbs into the cockpit of the lead A-20 Strafer, now bearing the nickname out of stock. A joke about how he'd scoured every Allied base in Australia for spare guns and parts. Behind him, 15 more converted A-20s warmed their engines. Each carries 8 forward-firing 50-caliber machine guns and a belly full of 23 pounds parachute fragmentation bombs. Parafrags. That gun also helped develop. The small parachutes slow the bombs just enough so the low-flying attacker can escape the blast radius. The target, Buna Airfield on New Guinea's northern coast. Intelligence reports show 30 Japanese aircraft parked there along with significant anti-aircraft defenses. Previous high-altitude raids have failed to knock the airfield out of operation. All aircraft, this is Black Leader. Gun radios. We're going in at 200 feet. Don't climb. Don't hesitate. Pour fire into everything that moves. The 16 strafers drop to wave altitude and streak toward Buna. Japanese radar operators spot them coming, but there's barely time to sound the alert before the strafers are overhead. Gunn's plane is the first across the airfield. His 8 forward guns open fire simultaneously. The effect is devastating. Traces tear through parked aircraft. Fuel trucks and ammunition dumps. Explosions ripple across the tarmac. Behind Gunn, the other 15 strafers add their firepower. Each plane unleashing 800 rounds per minute. Japanese anti-aircraft crews scramble to their guns, but the American strafers are too fast and too low. By the time the defenders acquire targets, the A-20s are already past them, dropping paraprags that crater runways and set buildings ablaze. The entire attack lasts 8 minutes. When the strafers return to base, damage assessment photos reveal stunning results. 22 Japanese aircraft destroyed on the ground. 3 more shot down trying to intercept. Fuel storage demolished and the runway rendered unusable for 5 days. Allied losses, 0 aircraft. The data speaks for itself. Traditional bombing raids against Buna had achieved a 12% target destruction rate. Gun strafers achieved 73% in a single pass. General Kenny is convinced. He immediately orders Gunn to begin converting B-25 Mitchells using the same concept, but even more heavily armed. By November 1942, Gunn's team has created B-25 strafers with up to 14 forward-firing 50-caliber machine guns, 8 in the nose, 4 in fuselage pods, and 2 more in cheek positions. The proof comes on March 3, 1943 during the Battle of the Bismarck Sea. Japanese intelligence reports a convoy of 8 transport ships and 8 destroyers leaving Rabaul carrying 6,900 troops to reinforce Lae, New Guinea. The convoy commander, Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura, believes his ships are safe because Allied bombers have never been able to inflict significant damage on moving naval targets. He's catastrophically wrong. On March 2, reconnaissance planes spot the convoy. On March 3, at dawn, the attack begins. 13 B-17s conduct high-altitude bombing, scoring some hits and forcing the convoy to scatter. Then at 10 a.m., 12 of Papy guns B-25 Strafers from the 3rd Bombardment Group arrive. Captain Edward Jock Hennebree leads the Strafer attack in his B-25, nicknamed Naughty Nan. He drops to 50 feet above the waves, so low that spray from the prop wash soaks the windscreen. His 14 forward guns open fire. The effect is apocalyptic. Japanese sailors aboard the transport Kyoku Maru watch in horror as the B-25 streak toward them, guns blazing. The 50 caliber rounds punch through steel hulls, detonate munitions, and sweep the decks clear of anyone exposed. Behind the strafing runs, the B-25s drop 500-pound bombs using skip bombing technique, bouncing them off the water directly into ship holes below the waterline. Kyoku Maru explodes in a massive fireball. Henneberry banks hard and makes 15 separate attack runs, even as his plane takes heavy anti-aircraft fire. His top turret gunner, Sergeant David Young, shoots down 2 Japanese fighters attempting to intercept. Over 3 days of continuous attacks, guns, Strafers, and other 5th Air Force bombers sink all 8 transport ships and 4 of 8 destroyers. Of the 6,900 Japanese troops aboard, only 100 survive. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea becomes the most decisive air-sea battle in the Pacific War to date. The kill ratio is staggering. 12 ships sunk for the loss of 4 American aircraft. Previous convoy attacks had achieved at best 1 ship sunk per 8 aircraft lost. Gun Strafers reversed that equation. Japanese after-action report recovered after the war includes this assessment from Captain Shigenori Kami JN. The American bombers with multiple forward guns are unlike anything we have encountered. They approach at wave height, making interception by fighters nearly impossible. Their concentrated fire sweeps our decks clean before we can man defensive positions. Our anti-aircraft guns cannot depress low enough to engage them. We have no effective counter to this tactic. Colonel Kazuo Tanakawa, an 8th Area Army staff officer, later said of the subsequent Waiwak raids, at the time of the air attacks on Waiwak, on 17 and the 18th of August, our defenses were not alert. We lost 100 planes, including light bombers, fighters, and reconnaissance planes. It was a decisive Allied victory. We were planning to regain the balance of air power. A few days before our projected plan was to materialize, we were bombed at Waiwak and our air power was severely crippled. By August 1943, gun Strafers have become the most feared aircraft in the Pacific. The Waiwak raids, hitting 4 airfields simultaneously, destroy 174 Japanese aircraft in 5 days, reducing the 4th Air Army from 200 operational planes to just 30. The modified B-25s continue their devastation throughout 1943 and 1944. By war's end, Strafer-configured B-25s have been credited with sinking over 150 Japanese ships and destroying more than 500 aircraft on the ground. Lives saved, impossible to calculate precisely, but Australian ground commanders estimate that the Strafer suppression of Japanese air power shortened the New Guinea campaign by at least 6 months. That's potentially 30,000 Allied casualties prevented. One B-25 pilot, Lieutenant William Bill Benn, later wrote home, "Pappy gun Strafers gave us a fighting chance. Before his mods, we were sitting ducks. After we were the hunters, every guy who flew a Strafer and came home owes Papy his life." These incredible stories of innovation deserve to be remembered. If you haven't already, smash that like button and share this video with anyone who loves military history. Now, let's talk about what happened after the war. On October 11, 1957, a twin-engine Beech 18 encounters a sudden tropical thunderstorm over the central Philippines. The pilot fights the controls as violent downdrafts slam the aircraft towards the jungle below. The plane crashes into dense forest, killing everyone aboard. The pilot's name was Paul Irvin Papy Gunn. He was 57 years old. After the war ended, Gunn had stayed in the Philippines, returning to civilian life, and rebuilding Philippine Airlines. He flew charter routes, trained new pilots, and largely avoided publicity. When reporters sought him out for interviews about his wartime innovations, he typically declined. "I just made planes work better," he told one persistent journalist in 1950, Real heroes are the guys who flew combat every day. I just gave them better tools. He never wrote a memoir, never gave speeches, never promoted himself. The man who revolutionized aerial warfare returned to the anonymous life of a civilian pilot, content to be forgotten. But his legacy was just beginning. By 1945, the Army Air Forces had converted more than 1,400 B-25 Mitchells into Straffer configuration based on guns modifications. North American Aviation eventually incorporated forward-firing gun packages into factory production B-25H and B-25J models, validating what their engineers had initially called structurally impossible. The AC-130 Spectre gunship, developed in the 1960s for Vietnam, traces its conceptual lineage directly to gun Straffers, a transport aircraft converted into a heavily armed gun platform for ground attack. The Spectre's designer studied guns work extensively. Today's AC-130J Ghost Rider, still in active service, carries forward the philosophy gun pioneered. Overwhelming firepower delivered from an unconventional A-frame. The United States Air Force Armament Museum at Eglin Air Force Base, Florida displays one of the few surviving B-25 Straffers. A small placard credits Major Paul Way gun with the design modifications. Most visitors walk past it without stopping. Gun's military decorations included 2 distinguished flying crosses, the Silver Star, the Legion of Merit, the Air Medal, and 9 Purple Hearts, evidence of his multiple combat wounds. He was nominated for the Medal of Honor twice. Both nominations were downgraded, partly because his modifications were still officially controversial within military procurement circles. His family was finally liberated from Stu. Thomas prison camp in February 1945. His wife Clara and their 4 children survived internment, though they carried the scars for the rest of their lives. Gunn never spoke publicly about the 3 years they spent imprisoned. Those who knew him said it was the only subject that could silence his legendary storytelling. In 2016, author John Bruning published Indestructible, one man's rescue mission that changed the course of by finally bringing Gunn's story to wider attention. The book sparked renewed interest in the forgotten innovator, but Gunn's name remains largely unknown outside military aviation circles. The moral lesson of Peppergun's story isn't about guns or bombs or technical specifications. It's about the power of necessity over bureaucracy, creativity over credentials, and action over permission. Gunn didn't wait for approval. He didn't let his lack of formal engineering training stop him from solving problems that degreed experts had declared unsolvable. He saw what needed to be done and he did it. Risking his career, his reputation, and ultimately his life. In a military culture that prizes hierarchy and procedure, Papy Gunn proved that sometimes the most important innovations come from the mavericks who refuse to accept that things can't be done. The Japanese had a name for his Straffers, Bimo no Hikoki, ghost planes. But the real ghost is Papy Gunn himself. A hero who changed warfare forever and then disappeared back into the ordinary world. Content to be forgotten. We shouldn't let him be.